Hey everybody, welcome to the show. Around the nation, right here, Jeff Waldorf. On this Wednesday. I keep forgetting it's not Tuesday, it's Wednesday. All the days seem to melt into each other during the Trump era. But anyway, welcome to the show. Got a great show for you guys today. We do have some breaking news to talk about that I'll get to in a couple minutes, including who's going to be the Speaker of the House, or who the Democrats just put up as Speaker of the House, as well as who is going to lead the House Democratic Caucus as soon as the new House session begins and Democrats take control. Not so good on those different accounts, but we'll talk about that. But first, we've got a great show today. We're going to talk about Donald Trump and his high levels of intelligence on the climate, and a Washington Post interview that you're not going to want to miss on that. Then we've got an interesting story of somebody who is on the right, who is an avowed right-winger, very anti-government, but is in favor of letting the refugees try to apply for asylum. So who is directly challenging President Trump on his issues on immigration. It's amazing. You're not going to want to miss that. That is an amazing story. Oh, we're going to talk about that. I think you're going to be very surprised, and I think you'll enjoy that segment. Then, of course, we've got a hospital here in Michigan, where I am based, that refused to do a heart transplant. Why? Well, it's just another reason our system is broken. Then we also have another story here. Let me get to it. Chuck Schumer. I think it's time for Chuck Schumer to go. Oh boy. So there's my thoughts on, I'm going to give you my thoughts on Chuck Schumer and some of his recent deals, or at least one of his recent deals. And oh boy, that's going to be exciting. Okay. First, before I get into it, we do have a question here that I get pretty often. Let's see. Is TYT Nation connected to the TYT network? Yes. Yes, we are. We're a partner channel. So if you've heard of Majority Report, if you've heard of Secular Talk, those are also part of the TYT network. We're also in that network as well. So that is my answer on that. We just don't get advertised as much. Humanist Report too. That's another excellent network partner. And so I've met a lot of great people through the network, by the way. But first, let's actually get to some news. And we'll start out with some of the breaking news about Pelosi. Basically, she is being nominated by the Democrats to become the next House Speaker. Well, great. Look, we all kind of knew it was going to happen. And to be fair, she is putting progressives on certain powerful positions. That's a good thing, but it still ultimately is a shit sandwich. So what do I mean by that? Nancy Pelosi, the only reason that she's actually being nominated towards the leadership position is because she knows how to raise money from corporate donors. So she works with a corporate donor. She takes corporate money. She's a corporatist. She works with Donald Trump. She works with the Republicans. And so it's like, how are you resisting? You're not resisting anything. You're working with Donald Trump and you're taking corporate money. That's not what we need for leadership in the Democrats, especially under Pelosi and under even President Obama. We saw massive losses for Democrats all over the country. So Nancy Pelosi is not the right person to take over. And I feel like every time I get into this debate, mainly with centrists or people who, you know, may not necessarily know better or have certain opinions on certain people, it's like, well, who's going to take her place if she's the most qualified? Yeah, but what makes her the most qualified? I mean, seriously, Well, obviously her years of service. So her years of service make her qualified. But in those years of service, what did she actually do? She raised money from corporate donors. Well, yeah, but she saved Social Security way back in the day. That's like the minimum that we should ask from our Democrats, is to protect Social Security. When in reality, what we should be asking from Democrats is a promise to expand Social Security, because there are holes in that system. And there is, problems with our Social Security safety net programs that, look, need to get fixed. For example, we need to lift the cap on payroll, on how much you can make and pay into the Social Security system. Right now, we have people that are too rich that have already paid into Social Security, that if we lift that cap and make them pay more into it, then Social Security will be solvent for the rest of time. So that cap needs to get lifted. That's one thing that we can fix. Also, there are a lot of people on Social Security that haven't actually had a significant cost of living increase. There are people still living on $800, $1,200 a month. That is not enough to live on. Not to mention there are issues with, people on disability not having enough to live on, et cetera, et cetera. So I'm sorry, Nancy, but you saving Social Security, that's the minimum that we expect from a Democrat. What else are you doing? Nothing other than raising money from corporate donors. And again, at least she gets some credit for putting progressives, or trying to do some deal making, putting progressives into certain positions, certain committees that are powerful and that will impact policy. And I hope that it will. But as long as Nancy Pelosi is Speaker, I just don't see the Democrats really pushing forward ahead with any sort of progressive policy while she's setting the agenda. And so it's kind of disastrous to hear that we're just going to be continuing to go in the same goddamn direction that we were going in before, especially after we had a record turnout in the midterms. These midterm elections were amazing. Democrats got millions of more votes than they normally did. Turnout was high. Energy was high. They won with an incredibly large margin. And yet, what is the first thing these corporate Democrats decide they're going to do? We're going to go back to doing what lost us the House in the first place. Gah. That, of course, brings me to the other piece of news. So now there are progressives out there trying to change that, trying to put us in a more progressive direction, trying to take some of these leadership positions. One of them was California Representative Barbara Lee. Now, Barbara Lee is a progressive. She's very strong on issues, which is wonderful, okay? And she was running for House Democratic Caucus. Now, that's, of course, one of the reasons I think that she wasn't running for Speaker of the House. And one of the reasons, of course, people would point out, well, what are the alternatives to Pelosi? Nobody, like, the one challenge from Pelosi actually comes from the even further right than Pelosi. So we were stuck in a bit of a shit sandwich. So what are we supposed to do, right? We're stuck with the shit. Kyle Kalinske did a video about this, and he basically said this is why politics blows. Because we're stuck in basically what it feels like is a no-win situation with the corporate Democrats. So here comes Barbara Lee, right? Barbara Lee is known, of course, as the person that cast the lone vote against the authorization of use of military force in the days after September 11th. So she's like an anti-war voice, which is widely needed on the left. So we need people who are anti-war, who are progressive, and who are unapologetically so. She also would have been the first black woman to have taken House leadership, which would have been great, would have been amazing. However, she did not win that position of House Democratic Caucus chair. You know who did win? Hakeem Jeffries of New York. Hakeem Jeffries has taken an incredible amount of corporate money. So that's what you have, right? Now, Hakeem Jeffries, of course, is been compared by Representative Juan Vargas as someone who was like President Obama. Oh, great. So here we have another guy being compared to Obama. What's the comparison? Well, he's young, black, and energetic. But I think the better comparison is takes lots of Wall Street money. And so that's what we have as leadership. So very likely Pelosi going to be the next Speaker of the House. That sucks. And then Barbara Lee will not be the House chair of the House Democratic Caucus, will not be in a leadership position. It will be somebody who has taken lots and lots of corporate money. And so, great. Wonderful. Fascinating. All right. So there's your disastrous news for the Democratic Party. All right. Now, let's go into some of the other news stories of the day that are not quite as depressing as what's happened with the Democrats. Look, I expect Republicans to be shit. I don't expect Democrats to be shit. So, I mean, that's my position on that. But anyway, let's move on. Okay. So yesterday, President Trump had an interview with the Washington Post about his climate change denial. So recently, the administration came out with a devastating report by his own administration, which, by the way, was released on a Friday, right in the middle of the holiday season. So it's pretty clear that their whole intent was to try to bury this thing because, of course, it wasn't favorable towards the administration's goals, which is basically, let's prop up oil, natural gas, and coal. Things that we should absolutely be cutting back on. So now, during this interview, and I also have a video here from when he was talking to reporters about this, about how he just doesn't believe in climate change. He didn't believe the report. In fact, I want to go to that video, and then we're going to go to some of the things that he was saying in that Washington Post interview, and then we're going to go to some of the reaction on Twitter. So first, let's hit that video.
I've seen it, I've read some of it, and it's fine. Yeah, I don't believe it. No, I don't believe it. And here's the other thing. You're going to have China and Japan and all of Asia and all of these other countries, you know, addresses our country. Right now, we're at the cleanest we've ever been, and that's very important to me. But if we're clean, but every other place on earth is dirty, that's not so good. So I want clean air, I want clean water, very important.
That's very important. We have the cleanest. We have record clean, right? No, we don't. As I explained in the segment yesterday, we are far from having record clean. May not be the dirtiest when it comes to the air and the water, but the Trump administration is actually pushing us towards dirtier air and water by lifting regulations. So now, later on in that day, of course, he talked to the Washington Post, and he tried to justify this by saying, as to whether or not it's man-made or whether or not the effects that you're talking about are there, I don't see it, not nearly like it is. So that's one quote, and there's a lot of other interesting quotes in that Washington Post story, but I'm going to skip those, and let's go to some of the Twitter reaction. Apparently, in response to him saying that he doesn't believe it because he has very high level of intelligence, there are some people that are questioning this. One is BC, who's BC Campbell 23, says, very high levels of intelligence, as he shows a picture of Trump staring directly into the eclipse, which is something that you're obviously not supposed to do. You could burn your retinas. Oh no, I have very high levels of intelligence, but I am going to stare directly into the sun. I am a very stable genius. In fact, Sarah Cooper echoes that sentiment by saying he makes George Bush sound like a goddamn genius. And he does. And believe me, starting to sound like Trump there. Bushisms, I thought that man was incredibly stupid. And by all intents and purposes, he is. But he looks like a Mensa member compared to Donald Trump. Man, that's pretty bad. Then you also have Naquan James, who said Trump will eventually care about climate change when his Florida estate is underwater. Look, likely he'll be dead by that time, realistically. But it is going to happen. Florida will be basically underwater, thanks to rising sea levels, thanks to climate change. So any of the Trumps that are still left alive, maybe the people that inherit the estate, Eric or Donald Jr., or Barron, more likely, they're not going to have Mar-a-Lago to go to. See, that's the problem with climate change. And yet this guy, he's like, oh no, I have very, very high intelligence. That's why I don't believe in the own report from 300 different scientists, 300 researchers, and 13 different agencies. Oh, I just don't believe it. I don't believe it. Why? Well, my gut tells me that I shouldn't believe it. Your gut is wrong. Look, this guy is deeply ignorant, and that, unfortunately, look, it's funny, but he's also the leader of this country. And so when you think about how much power and influence he has, when he says stuff that is deeply anti-intellectual, and he asserts that he is smarter than scientists, and he doesn't believe scientific fact, that should be deeply disturbing. And so it is deeply disturbing. Okay. Anyway, let's continue on that climate report. Okay. Faced with the looming disaster of climate change, the Trump administration published a report recently, which, at the end of the day, painted a pretty bleak picture of the world if we refuse to rein in carbon emissions and switch to a cleaner form of energy. Now, there is one problem, of course. Trump himself, the president, doesn't believe his own report. Now, I talked about that, and yesterday when he was asked by reporters about the 13 governmental agency report on climate change, he said, well, I don't believe it. I mean, I looked at it a little bit. No, you didn't. You didn't look at it. You didn't read it. You didn't care about it because you already made up your mind. Oh, I don't believe in climate change. I don't believe in that. I don't believe in the science. I don't believe in the scientists. I believe in my gut. Later on in an interview with the Washington Post, he went into further detail. He said, one of the problems that a lot of people like myself, we have very high levels of intelligence, but we're not necessarily such believers. You look at our air and our water, and right now it's at record clean. As to whether or not it's man-made or whether or not the effects that you're talking about are there, I don't see it. Not nearly like it is. What does that even mean? No, we've got record clean. We've got record clean water as it pertains to water. And by the way, it's big water, ocean water. No, the guy is not a very smart person, okay? And since he's talking about having such high levels of intelligence, it's kind of funny considering that we're not even talking about necessarily the air or the water, which are not at record clean. What we're talking about is carbon in the atmosphere. And yes, that does have something to do with the air, with the water, but we're not necessarily talking about just that. We're talking about the climate as a whole. Now, that White House report, which she's referencing, included data from 300 researchers, right? And notes that the country had already warmed 1.8 degrees Fahrenheit over the past century and will warm a further 3 degrees by 2100 unless we scale back the use of fossil fuels. Now, predictions even said that at its worst, warming could approach 9 degrees or more by the end of the century. Now, look, 1.8 degrees, so we've already seen what's happened there. Okay, stronger storms, more wildfires, changing climate. We've seen that, okay? The drop of ice in the Arctic. We have seen all this already. That's 1.8 degrees. Now imagine doubling that. Then imagine going to 9 degrees. Oh, it's unfathomable what kind of changes are in store if we don't actually do something about it now. So, look, it also says, by the way, that among threats to health and the environment, it also warned that sweeping damage could cut off as much as 10% of the U.S. economy. So that, even if you don't give a shit about the climate, you might actually want to care about the economy. If all you care about is money and productivity, well then, you might want to look at this and go, oh crap, here we're going to have massive economic impacts. Maybe we should actually do something and create jobs along the line, such as enacting a Green New Deal. Okay? But here's the thing that's really, really important. This is based on actual data, actual facts from people that are much smarter than me, likely you, and definitely Donald Trump. These are people who do research for a living. So they know what they're talking about. But of course, right now, there's a big problem in the United States, and it's basically a strain of anti-intellectualism as well as anti-elitism. I get it, right? The elites are cut off from us. I get that, right? And if you're a member of the elite and you're not doing the right thing, if you're doing the wrong thing in order to enrich yourself, that is a problem. If you are a smart person and you have money and you're actually doing the right thing, you're actually trying to do the right thing, you're trying to eliminate economic income inequality, if you're trying to look out for the environment, if you're using your money for philanthropic causes, great, more power to you. I don't have a problem with that, right? If you're an elite person, great. As long as you're doing the right thing, I don't care. The problem with our elites right now is that they're not doing the right thing. They're doing all the wrong things in order to enrich themselves. But we have this strain of anti-intellectualism. I mean, look, take this quote from Trump's interview. He said, they're making a mistake. Meaning the scientists, right? Because I have a gut, and my gut tells me more sometimes than anybody's brain can ever tell me. Oh, it's my gut. He thinks his gut is smarter than everyone else. Is smarter than scientists. Smarter than people whose life is based on research. And he's doing this based on a feeling. But wait a minute. What happened to facts, not feelings? MAGA guys. Ben Shapiro, where are you? Where are you? You want to talk about facts versus feelings? He just says, I got a feeling in my gut that everybody else is wrong except for me. Well, what happened? What happened? What happened to science? Oh, don't you care about science? No, of course you don't care about science. You care about politics. You care about pushing your agenda. That's all you care about. Look, here we have is a dumb person in charge, right? And guess what? When dumb people are in charge, things start to fall apart. Now, I actually like it when the people who run things know how to actually run the thing they're in charge of. I like smart people, okay, in positions where they're supposed to be, where they can actually use their skills to do the best. And we do not have that. I mean, call me a fucking elitist if you want. But when it's the fate of civilization at stake, let's get some smart people in charge who know how to fix it. And Trump, he's not a smart person. He's not a very stable genius, right? He's a conspiracy theorist surrounded by fucking clowns. For example, clown number one, Sarah Huckabee Sanders. Now, she recently got on the air and she said this.
The president's certainly leading on what matters most in this process, and that's on having clean air, clean water. In fact, the United States continues to be a leader on that front. Even Obama's undersecretary for science didn't believe the radical conclusions of the report that was released. And you have to look at the fact that this report is based on the most extreme modeled scenario, which contradicts long established trends. Modeling the climate is an extremely complicated science that is never exact. The biggest thing that we can do is focus on how to make sure we have the cleanest air, the cleanest water, and the president is certainly doing that and certainly leading on that front.
How is he doing that? I mean, the president's about to go to Buenos Aires and meet with all the leaders of the world's industrialized nations and developing nations as well. Isn't this a great opportunity for him to sit at the table and say, folks, this is what my administration just reported. This is the time that we all have to act in concert to prevent what my administration is forecasting?
Once again, we think that this is the most extreme version, and it's not based on facts. It's not data driven. We'd like to see something that is more data driven. It's based on modeling, which is extremely hard to do when you're talking about the climate. Again, our focus is on making sure we have the safest, cleanest air and water, and the president's going to do exactly that.
Oh man, you know, we'd love to see something more data driven. That is data driven. It's driven up. It's your entire, like, this came from the Trump administration. Okay, you don't believe your own government's report. You can see how they did it. You can look into their methodology. You can see all the data that they have gathered. This isn't, it's an Obama report. So obviously they've got a political agenda. These are your own people. This is your own government. And she's saying, no, I don't believe it at all. It's not based on facts. It is based on facts. Look, all climate reports are based on the same kind of modeling. And that model has actually been pretty conservative, right? Because for a long time, scientists were like, no, we got to make sure that we don't alarm people because they're going to call us alarmists. So we'll publish the most conservative type of reports that still say, you know, come to the same conclusion that, hey, we need to get away from fossil fuels. We need to start doing something better for the environment, and you know, not burn as much coal, etc. We come for the same, like, we're going to try to do the same thing. We've got the same outcome, but we're not going to scare the crap out of people. Well, that's changed because now it's panic time, right? Those worst case scenarios that were before are now considered the best case scenarios if we do not act. Because, look, this is serious. We have found, you know, data that actually shows that it's worse than we had thought before. The oceans had actually absorbed a lot of the carbon, and that has been leading to more ocean acidification, bleaching of corals, etc. So the ocean has actually taken a big hit, but it's getting to the point where the ocean is pretty close to not being able to absorb any more carbon from the atmosphere, which means the more carbon that we're emitting, or at least the same amount of carbon that we're emitting, now is getting added even more to the atmosphere, which is going to exacerbate future warming trends. It is going to get far worse. So this is serious. Nonetheless, clown number 2, Ryan Zinke, he said that this report's conclusions were based on, quote, the worst scenarios. Well, then what's the best scenario? If at least you're admitting that some of these scenarios are plausible. But even though Zinke got it wrong, in fact, you had an author of the report taken to Twitter, and this is Catherine Cahill. She is a co-author of the current assessment and director of the Climate Science Center at Texas Tech University. She tweeted out, quote, I wrote the climate scenarios chapter myself, so I can confirm it considers all scenarios, from those where we go carbon negative before the end of the century to those where carbon emissions continue to rise. So she knows, and she calls out the bullshit. It's like, actually, I wrote that. It takes in all factors, and what you're saying is not wrong. Or I'm sorry, what you're saying is wrong. The report is not wrong. We are headed for some serious disaster. But of course, as I've shown before, experts are not going to sway the president because, well, he doesn't care about facts. Well, he cares all about what his gut says. And his gut says Donald Trump can never be wrong. Donald Trump is 100% right. And so let's go coal. Facts don't matter to him, man. Look, he spreads insane conspiracy theories. Again, you know, just look at some of the stuff that he said before about climate change, for one, that it's a Chinese hoax meant to kill American manufacturing. He's also had conspiracy theories about the president's birth certificate, etc. So he, look, spreads misinformation. And unfortunately, he is in a position of power. Somebody who should be ridiculed and laughed at and disregarded is one of the most powerful people on earth. And his stance on climate change is literally playing with people's lives. Everyone on the coast is going to be affected. Half of Florida is going to be underwater by the year 2100. That is not hyperbole. That will happen as oceans rise. And when, of course, people start leaving their homes because they're inhabitable because of extreme heat and extreme conditions, well, then we're going to have mass migration that no one is currently prepared for, much less the United States. You think the immigrant caravan with, 4,000 to 5,000 migrants, you think that was bad? Oh no, you haven't seen nothing yet. What happens when 1 million, 2 million people start trying to get in other places? Start trying to leave their homes because they can't stay in their country anymore because their country is under extreme drought conditions or is underwater. We are not prepared for this. We are not prepared to see what is coming. But we know it's coming because it's right in front of our face. People are warning us. But no, we're not going to do anything about it. We're ignoring it. And it's because of idiots like Donald Trump and propaganda outlets like Fox News, think tanks like that are funded by the Koch brothers, ALEC, all these different organizations that don't give a shit about the climate, and all they care about is short-term profits. That's all they care about. And they are steering us on the course of destruction so they can make an extra buck. That's what's going on here. And unfortunately, until we actually throw off that strain or get rid of that strain of anti-intellectual bullshit and actually look at the facts, we are headed in for a massive disaster. So buckle up, everybody. Because unless we can fix this and we can work on fixing this now, we're in for a hell of a disastrous ride. All right. All right, here's what we're going to do. We're going to go to a break. We're going to come back with conservative turning on Donald Trump on immigration. And like I said, you're going to love that story, so stick around for that. We'll be right back around the nation. Welcome back to the show. Around the Nation right here. Jeff Waldorf with you. Got a couple of super chats that I want to read here. One from Shane McAndrew. He asks, did you hear about Warren Kanders, one of Cory Booker's corporate donors, who made the tear gas used in the migrant caravan last weekend? No, I will. Thank you. I'm going to have to look that up. Wow, that's a fascinating story. Thank you for that. See, that's one of the reasons Super Chat's awesome. So, look, because there are things that I haven't heard of that I need to look up. So thank you. I appreciate that. Jay says, the donor sent a message to the Democrats that they supported having Nancy as speaker. That they absolutely did. And so that is disastrous. But it just shows you that Nancy and a lot of the corporate Democrats listen to the donors because the donors basically still run the show. So that's what we're going to do here. Until we replace more of these corporate Democrats with progressives, we are going to see more of the same shit. So anyway, thank you, Shane McAndrew, and thank you, Jay. So I appreciate that. And I will look at that link later. Thank you for providing that. Okay. So now, related to the migrant caravan is our next story. Let's just, well, let's dive into it. So immigration has been a major issue for Donald Trump and the right wing. In fact, leading up to the midterms, the president and many of his followers on the right had been railing against the so-called migrant caravan. Now, that migrant caravan is full of asylum seekers who were at the time traveling to the border. So that was a midterm stunt, which ended up having soldiers being put on the border, and even ended up just recently involving a tear gas incident in which Border Patrol ended up firing tear gas canisters at peaceful asylum seekers in basically what is a war crime. Now, right now, the majority of them, of course, as I said, are peaceful, and they're waiting for their asylum requests to be granted by the government. Now, that, of course, has led to more fear-mongering among the right about migrants trying to sneak in, being violent. Oh, my God, they're throwing rocks, and they're throwing bottles, and they're trying to sneak in. And, again, that was a very, very, very small splinter group, etc., right? One splinter group that tried to do it, a couple of people, they ended up getting arrested, but the majority has been peaceful. Now, again, when you hear a lot of people talk about it on the right, it paints the picture of, well, they're all violent, they're all terrible people, they're all terrorists, it's full of Middle Eastern, they're trying to steal children to try to get into the United States. It's just the most horrible conspiracy theories. Now, one right-winger has actually had enough of the conspiracies and actually set out to look at some of the facts. And this is somebody who we didn't expect. Now, in a Facebook video post, Ammon Bundy, famous for doing the Bundy standoff with Cliven Bundy, of course, decided that he was going to push back against misinformation on the immigrant caravan. And so I want to show you some of that video right now. Let's take a look.
I have done a decent amount of research and have found that I do believe, and I tried to go outside of the media, both in this case, the media from, the conservative side and the media from the liberal side. Because I do not believe either one of them are telling the truth. They both have their own motives. On the liberal side, you've got, oh, we've got to let them in. We got the bleeding heart, just, and many other different aspects that just don't align with the truth, the facts. And then you've got the conservative, if you will, side of it that is, they're here because they've been sent here by the UN and they're being paid by George Soros, and they're all a bunch of terrorists, and I have found that that's a bunch of garbage too.
So that's interesting, right? So now this is what actually happens when you look at the facts. You find out that, oh, it turns out the right wing is not correct, and it's not funded by the UN or George Soros to try and replace American citizens. It turns out that these people actually just need help because Honduras is a mess, partly thanks to the actions of course, the United States government, as well for, training the Honduran general that overthrew the democratically elected leftist government of Honduras. And so I talked about that in a different video, what actually happened in the Honduran coup and how Hillary Clinton is actually somewhat involved and how it was just a failure of our government as well to push back against what happened in Honduras, which created these terrible conditions. Now, I love that he compared left-wing media to right-wing media. He's like, he didn't really have a really good example of stuff that the left wing was saying that was really bad. He's just like, well, I mean, they're bleeding hearts. They just say that we should let them in. But on the right, here we have conspiracy theories. So I thought that was kind of funny because he's trying to stretch to do a little criticism of the left to try to not alienate his viewers and people that, follow him, etc. But he couldn't really find much of a reason. So I thought that was interesting. But nonetheless, Ammon goes on to talk about the conditions in Honduras, of course, as I talked about that. So then he also calls out what he sees as not factual reporting when it comes to media sources on the right. And here's a little bit more of that video. Let's take a look.
To group them all up like, frankly, our president has done, try to speak great respectfully, but he has basically called them all criminals and said they're not coming in here. At least that's what I've seen. It seems that there's been this, group stereotype. But what about the individual? What about those who have come for reasons of need? Their families? What about, the fathers, the mothers, and the children that have come here and are willing to go through the process to apply for asylum and so that they can come into this country and benefit from not having to be oppressed continually with criminals.
So right there, look, that's the conservative position. If that was the truly conservative position, then yeah, we would have no problem coming to a really good compromise. Because that's an actual sensible, rational position. Saying, okay, yes, let's let them in. Let's look at their cases individually. Ocasio-Cortez, by the way, had a great idea. She said, instead of sending 5,000 troops to the border, let's send 5,000 people who could process cases. So we send people down there. We process the asylum cases like that. Problem solved. The people that can come in should come in. The people that shouldn't come in, people who are criminals, people who are gang members, people who are violent, should not come in. Boom. Easy. Now, of course, the Trump administration, they're dragging their heels because they don't want these people in because, well, they're brown. We don't like these people because they look different than us. We think that they're George Soros plants are from the UN to try to affect elections or something like that to steal America. In fact, of course, Ammon goes into fear, right, in this next video. And I want to show you that in a minute. But first, here's the thing. I just got to give this guy credit. I don't agree with him on probably 99% or 95% of policy issues, right? And I've had my issues with the Bundys, right? But in reality, it is pretty ballsy, and I got to give him credit to come out and say this stuff as a member of the right wing. And he started out the video saying, look, I talked about this on a stream before, and I got death threats. I got people saying that they want to come into my house and kill me for me being actually human to migrants and me actually having some sort of empathy for other human beings who are going through a difficult time. And so it is ballsy, because this is somebody who, again, was elevated in right-wing circles and now is facing what progressives, what liberals, people who are not on that side, face all the time from their side. And that's, of course, threats of violence. So anyway, again, like I said, I got to give him a lot of credit for coming out and saying, no, this is what you're saying is on this side is not factual. I looked up the facts and they're not at all what you're saying. And we should actually give these people the chance. But I want to give you that snippet here, that last clip of where he talks about the real motivations behind some of the right wing and their rhetoric and Trump's rhetoric on this issue. Let's take a look at that.
I think the main reason that I have seen, or almost, well, actually, it's been exclusive in every conversation that I've had, in every email or message that has been sent to me in opposition. Their main motive or argument is based upon fear of this, from anywhere from, a domestic, or not a domestic, but a terrorist coming in to, and doing some harm, doing something to that effect. Look at this phone call here. To, economically, they're going to take our food, they're going to get on welfare, and they're going to, destroy our country with welfare, they're going to bring in a disease. It's all fear-based, and it's frankly based upon selfishness. That, I'm going to lose something, by them coming in. And I think that's incorrect. I mean, I think that the facts are incorrect on that, of what would really happen. But also, to base your arguments or your motives or your actions based upon fear is a very a dangerous thing to do. Fear is the opposite of faith. Faith is the opposite of fear.
All right, so look, again, I think this is great. Again, this is somebody who looked at the facts and said, well, wait a minute. Here's what the facts are, and here's what we should be doing based on this. And he's saying that the conversation, it's correct. It is based on fear. Fear and selfishness. He's absolutely right. Because all the things that I have seen against immigrations, against the migrant caravan, is just conspiracy theories. And people that are like, oh my God, they're going to come in, they're going to take our jobs, they're going to take our welfare, they're going to take our money, they're going to take something from me. And so I don't want these people in here. But it's not true. It's actually not the truth. And so, kudos to him for actually seeing that and realizing, oh my God, we were having a situation or a conversation based on people being afraid. And maybe when we know the facts, we're not afraid. So I think it's great. Now, he also said, basing all your motives on fear is a dangerous thing to do. And I agree with that because, look, we have seen where that road goes. And that road goes to some very, very dark places, right? And then, of course, he turns to faith later on. And look, I'm not a believer in religion, but at least he's actually using the good parts of the Bible. Because I actually think that there is good stuff in some of the religious texts. There's good stuff in the Quran. I know heads just exploded. There's good stuff in the Torah. There's good stuff in the Bible, of course. There's good stuff in a lot of these religious texts. And there's a lot of bad stuff, too. And so it is refreshing to see a right-winger saying, no, I want to use the good stuff in the Bible. And then he talked about, of course, and this is his conservative position, I would love to sponsor a family or two, if I could. Like, I'd sponsor a family, we'll set them up with a tent, help them get a job, help them get their paychecks and help set them up for the American dream. And I think that's fine. And I think that's the more conservative expression of what we want to do, because in reality, the conservative position should be, okay, we let people in based on, like they follow the rules, right? Asylum seeking is 100% legal, so they go and do that, right? So they do their asylum, they apply for it, they come in, they get jobs, they work, right? And families will set them up. I don't necessarily agree, because I don't think that that's as effective as having like maybe a government program that will help get them jobs and maybe temporary housing and things like that. But that's neither here nor there. That's, of course, getting into nitty-gritty policy positions. But right now, the Republican position, the Trump position, and Trump is the Republican Party, is, no, we keep them out. They're all terrible. They're all horrible. They're carrying diseases. They're full of Middle Eastern. They're terrorists. They're George Soros funded. They're the UN. They're coming in to take over America. We don't want them in here. And that, as I said before, is not true. That is based on fear. It is based on bullshit. There are no facts on there. And so that's not even a valid position. And thank goodness there's somebody out there that also agrees. There are people on the right that actually do agree that, hey, you know what? Let's listen to facts and let's actually come up with real positions to help these people. And the best position, of course, is to help people. And even the religious position, which he is advocating for, which, again, I don't necessarily agree with the religion part, but he's saying, look, maybe we should help people. I mean, he says later on in that video that we've been called on by God to help our neighbors, to help people, to take care of them, to house them, treat the immigrant as you would treat yourself. And look, I've got religious family, right? Now, he also says something that I disagree with later on. He says, well, we should do that because we're a Christian nation. Not true. We're not a Christian nation, but we're a secular nation that just happens to be full of Christian people, right? But not only Christian people, there's Muslims, there's Jewish people, there's atheists, there's Buddhists, there's just all sorts of religions, because, again, we're a diverse nation with diverse viewpoints, but majority Christian, right? So, but I think that from that diversity, we draw a lot of strength. And he kind of makes the same point later, is in saying that immigrants, when they come into the country, they add to America, they don't take things away. And so I think, look, I love that he's not buying from the fear-mongering from Trump, and that he's sitting out there and he's speaking out. And so I love how he's speaking out against other members of the right, people like Tommy Lauren, who's the complete opposite, who just basically profit off scaring people and selling that fear. And look, he is right about migrants, some of the migrants being, doing things that are criminal, some things, because look, there are people that are not perfect, and not everybody, of course, who comes through is, I guess, perfect, right? People are people. And that's, of course, why you vet them, you check them, you run them through, the databases or what have you, to make sure that they're not dangerous. And if they're gang affiliated, then you don't let them in. It's a pretty simple process. And I think maybe some of you might think that that's, you're taking a right-wing position on that. Maybe I am. But I think that's a way that, we could possibly help these people and still maybe reassure others that the people that are coming in are good people, and may mostly are. And so I guess at least it'll make some people feel a little bit more comfortable about letting in migrants. So I don't know. But look, the vast majority, I think, of immigrants and the vast majority of the people inside that caravan just wanted to come to the country to get away from terrible conditions and to actually have opportunity. And so we need to build that, and we need to give these people the chance, and we need to urge people to stop listening to those who want to make money off scaring the rest of us. So I think this is great. I commend him for this. And I never thought that I would be agreeing wholeheartedly, or almost wholeheartedly, with Ammon freaking Bundy. So how's that for a day? Okay. Weird shit, right? It's a strange times, man. Let's move on. All right. In what has become symbolic of America's failed healthcare system, a woman recently shared a letter of rejection for a heart transplant unless she could come up with $10,000. So she was rejected because she didn't have that money, and they said, well, we would allow you to have it if you're able to raise $10,000. You should start a fundraiser. You should start a GoFundMe. Now, according to the Detroit Free Press, they said Spectrum Health Heart and Lung Specialized Care Clinics had sent a letter to Hedda Martin saying that she wasn't eligible for a transplant because she didn't have secure financing for drugs she needed to keep the body from rejecting the new organ. Now, Martin posted the letter to her Facebook page the next day, explaining that the hospital wanted to ensure that she could afford the $700 monthly fee for anti-rejection drugs, while their health insurance plan's yearly deductible was $4,500. So, wow. Now, Spectrum said, oh, but we have a duty to make sure that organs remain viable and that costs are a factor in the decision-making process. They said, while our primary focus is the medical needs of the patient and the fact is that transplants require lifelong care and immunosuppression drugs. Therefore, costs are sometimes a regrettable and unavoidable factor in the decision-making process. So what they're saying is, look, unless you have money, unless you can afford these drugs, which are incredibly expensive, prohibitively expensive, then I'm sorry, we're just going to have to let you die. That's basically it. You can't really sugarcoat that. That's exactly what that letter is saying. Unfortunately and regretfully, we're going to have to let you die because you just don't have enough money for the immunosuppressant drugs. Sorry. But wait, how messed up is that? Now, like when you first hear the story and you're living in America, you're like, well, of course, you have to make sure that the heart is viable and you know, that it's got to go to a person who can, you know, who's not going to reject that heart. But when you really think about it, no, that's really messed up. That is really fucked up. Because here we have a system that says if you don't have a certain amount of money, we are okay with letting you die. We are not going to help you out. We're going to advise you to go crowdfund to make sure that you don't die. Now, what happens if you can't raise a lot of money? Now, luckily for her, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, she caught this, and she's like, dear God, I need to share this, right? This is a terrible story. This is why we need Medicare for all. This is why we need universal health care. We don't need more access to health care. She has all the access in the world to health care. She has insurance. She has private insurance. But a $4,500 deductible, she is 60 years old, has a heart condition, probably can't work. How is she supposed to come up with $10,000? Well, go fundraise. But again, if you can't get enough money from fundraising, well, then you're just supposed to die. That system is deeply immoral. But again, thanks to Ocasio-Cortez, she is able to raise that much money. In fact, she raised about $17,000 from that fundraiser. But what would have happened if she wasn't there? If Ocasio-Cortez hadn't found this, hadn't shared out the fundraiser or this story? Well, what would have happened is the same thing that happens to the thousands of Americans, tens of thousands of Americans who can't afford life-saving health care. There are constant stories of people dying because they can't afford health care or health insurance, or their medications like insulin, or life-saving surgeries, or even preventative care that could have caught cancer ahead of time, or another condition before it became life-threatening, because our system does not prioritize preventative care. when you have large deductibles, when you have to have so much money in order to see a doctor, you don't see a doctor. You just don't. You can't afford it, even if in the long run, it actually saves so much more money when you catch things before they happen. But again, people make decisions not on what's best for their health, but they make decisions based on what's in their wallet, what's in their bank account. And that is not a system that we need to be in. That is not a system that we should have. But this is what healthcare in America, unfortunately, is. And basically, only in America do we have these issues. We are the only country in the world, in the modern industrialized country, right? In the mix of modern industrialized nations, we're the only one that doesn't have a true universal healthcare system. All other countries that are modern have a single payer or some sort of other universal system, whether it be a mix of private and public or private nonprofit, etc. They've got something that is universal where everyone is guaranteed affordable health care. Affordable health care, not affordable health insurance, not access to affordable health insurance. They're guaranteed health care. They do it cheaper. They do it better. Canada does it for less. The UK does it for half the cost that we do annually per person. They can do it. We can too. Oh, but Jeff, you don't understand. If we go to a single payer system, then people are going to die in waiting lines, waiting for healthcare. Well, how's that any different than people not waiting in line and still dying because they don't have the money to go to the doctor in the first place? That's what happens in America. Look at her. She couldn't even wait in a line because she didn't have the money. So this is the problem. This is the problem in America. Okay. Like, people are not waiting in lines, but they are still dying because they know that they can't even get to the line to wait because they just don't have the money to be involved in our healthcare system. But here's the thing. Look, all these pro health insurance advocates, which is an insane thing because basically you're telling everybody, oh, hey, I can't wait to pay more for my healthcare. I can't wait to pay way more than everyone else and get inferior levels of healthcare compared to other countries. Oh, I can't wait to do that. I'm a pro health insurance advocate. They tell you, basically, they sell you fear, right? Because that's all they have to run on. But we know what works. The American people now know what works, as over 70% of Americans now favor a single-payer healthcare system. Why? Because it works everywhere else. You can look everywhere else it works. You can travel to these places, and they will tell you. People will tell you, we may not have a perfect system, but we have far better than what you guys have in America. Because situations like this don't happen in America. Or I'm sorry, don't happen anywhere else, but that happens in America. Okay? But you know what actually doesn't work? Again, we know it works. It works everywhere else. But what doesn't work is a system in which 42% of new cancer patients use up their life savings in the hopes that they don't die. Their entire life savings gone. A system where people have to start a GoFundMe to make sure that they don't die to afford their insulin, right? And speaking of insulin, we have a system where people have to ration their insulin because it's so prohibitively expensive. We have a system where insurance CEOs make millions of dollars denying people care. That is your death panel right there. A system that brutalizes us in the aims of getting more short-term profit. That is a system that doesn't work. What we need is single payer, and we need it now. We need a single payer healthcare system. Bernie Sanders expanded Medicare plan that expands not just Medicare to everybody, but also expands Medicare into covering things like vision, dental, drugs, things like that. We need that plan. HR 676. We need it. We could use it, and we could use it now. Not in 10 years, not in 20 years, not incremental change. We need change now, because right now people are dying that don't need to. And people right now are fundraising for their health care when they shouldn't have to, when health care should be guaranteed in the wealthiest country in the world. This system is a sickness that needs to be cured. Okay. I hope I'm fairly clear about that. Okay. Now let's go to Chuck Schumer. So Chuck Schumer is minority leader for the Democrats in the Senate. He's a Senate minority leader, and he just made a deal with Donald Trump to fund the border wall. Now, I want to give you some context here. The Democratic Party, in the midterm elections, routed the Republican Party. Why? They ran on progressive ideas. They ran against Trump. They ran against the border wall. They ran in favor of things like Medicare for all, even abolishing ICE. They flipped nearly 40 seats. That is the largest gain for Democrats since Watergate. They received a historic amount of votes across the country. They broke Donald Trump's control of the government by taking back the House. And yet, Chuck Schumer decides, you know what I'm going to do? The first thing that we're going to do when I get control of the, when Democrats take control of the House and when I take my place as minority leader of the Senate, I'm going to reach out to Donald Trump and give him almost everything he wants. Now, CNN recently reported that Schumer is willing to provide the president with $1.6 billion in funding for his border wall. Manu Raju said on Twitter, Schumer's office said the $1.6 billion in funding is what Democrats want is for border security generally. Fencing, but not a concrete wall. The $1.6 billion for border security negotiated by Democrats and Republicans is our position. So wait, why are you giving Trump $1.6 billion for border security? Why? Why is that your position? Look, Schumer, it's not like Schumer's from Alabama and he's got to carry a Republican constituency. And so, oh man, I've got to make deals. No, Chuck Schumer is from New York. He's a senator from New York in a place where Donald Trump lost by 22 points. What are you doing reaching out and saying, our position is we're going to give you money for border security, which of course we all know Trump would take that money and go, oh yeah, border security. I'm going to put it in the wall, big concrete wall. How many times have the Republicans lied? How many times has Mitch McConnell lied? How many times has Donald Trump lied about what they want to do? And Schumer's like, oh, I've got a great idea. Let's make a deal. I'm going to give you $1.6 billion for that border security that you got to promise me it's not going to go to the border wall. Bullshit. Weak ass Democrats, man. This is the problem. Chuck Schumer is the problem. I've got another tweet from Raju. He says, Chuck Schumer tells reporters on his on-cam presser that Democrats' position is $1.6 billion for wall funding, far less than the $5 billion that Trump wants. But he won't say if Democrats are shutting the door on anything more, saying he's not going to negotiate in public. Oh, so no, I'm going to give you 1.6, but I'm not saying that I won't give you all $5 billion, but you got to meet with me back doors. You got to meet with me away from the public. We don't want more backroom deals, especially when you're dealing with Donald Trump. And by the way, knowing Chuck Schumer, he's going to eventually be like, here, I'm going to give you $7 billion for the wall. Please don't be mean to me. So please work with me. Please don't call me too liberal. I swear to God, I'm not liberal. Yeah, I know, Chuck. I know. We all know you're not liberal. We all know you're not progressive. We know you're a corporatist. And we know that you were incredibly, deeply sad and weak. And you are no one's leader. You are no one's leader. In fact, let me show you some of the things that, or tell you some of the things that Schumer has actually done. In addition to clearing the way for numerous Trump judicial nominations, by the way, I'm going to make a deal with Trump. I'm going to allow all these judicial nominations for all these lower courts so you can stack the courts with Republicans who are going to be there for life, for years, for decades, controlling the judiciary with Trump-appointed justices, which are Heritage Foundation and other Koch-aligned groups, Koch-funded groups. These are the judges that Schumer said, oh, no, go ahead and put those in there so that we can have a few more days off campaigning before the midterms. Just go ahead and let them through. Just let us out a couple of days early so we can go fundraise for the midterm elections. In addition to that, which is a horrible deal, he has also condemned fellow Democrats while calling for more civility in politics. Civility means, we got to work together with Donald Trump, a proto-fascist. He also enabled the repeal of financial regulations put in place after the Great Recession. So meaning we're probably going to slide back into another Great Recession after the banks, of course, crash the economy once again and then get bailed out once again. Not only that, but he praised Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell. He praised the president for moving the United States Embassy in Israel, which has caused a lot of violence so far. Back to confirmations of Homeland Security Secretary John Kelly, FBI Director Christopher Wray, CIA Director Mike Pompeo, U.S. Ambassador to the UN Nikki Haley, Director of National Intelligence Dan Coates, Defense Secretary Jim Mattis, Veterans Affairs Secretaries David Shokin and Robert Wilkie. Shokin, by the way, is famous for wanting to destroy the VA. And Agriculture Secretary Sonny Perdue. I don't know how many of those, and there probably is a lot of them, that have been, of course, facing massive ethics violations. But Chuck Schumer didn't care. He's like, oh, no, civility. I got to let him through. Look, man, Schumer, I dump on Pelosi. I dump on Dianne Feinstein all the time for being, conservative, right? And not being strong leaders. But Chuck Schumer is the worst of it all. Chuck Schumer is literally the worst. And he is terrible at his job. He is not strong. He is not progressive. He is a corporatist. He takes corporate money, and he works with Donald freaking Trump. Oh, you want to talk about resistance? He's not resisting anything except for progressive change. He's not resisting anything but the Democratic base itself. That man, this weak-ass Democrat, he has got to go. I cannot wait. And there was a tweet here in response to Raju from Ashley Feinberg that really sums up how I feel about this. She said, quote, just sitting here daydreaming about AOC, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, primarying the hell out of Schumer. I can't wait for that day. As if it happens, she's going to crush him. We can all dream. But in reality, we've got to get rid of Schumer. We've got to get rid of him now. All right. That's it. That's all I got for you guys today. Thank you for going around the nation with me. Please give us a like and a share if you haven't already. Don't have any more super chats, but please consider supporting us on Patreon. Our YouTube views are way down. So I'm getting a little nervous here. So if you can, please go and like and share our clips. As soon as they're up, they start at 5 o'clock, 6, 7, 8, 9, in that order. So check those out, share them out. Please like them, and please like the channel. So, all right, guys. Thank you. Love you guys. And remember, change begins with you. Good night, nation. We'll see you guys tomorrow.